All right. So I am going through triadic healing right now, and I have never done this before. This is the diagram I want to look on. This is what I call the cognitive core and the stages of change. This looks complicated and simple at the same time. So I'm just going to go ahead and start breaking this down because this is where things really, this is where the magic happens. This is located inside the identity. This is what the subconscious mind is in charge of. I'm going to go ahead and go back one more screen, and this is the cognitive core, the big picture. So if you were to go over to our gorgeous, the Life Titans, this is the philosopher's compass. You have your identity, you have your conscious awareness, and then you have the subconscious mind. Now, I use the word subconscious mind differently here. This is where it's definitely the one thing I'm using incorrectly, and I acknowledge that, but I have yet to come up with a better term for this. So this is me very much acknowledging my own fallacy here, and I'm working on it. The subconscious mind, as we all know, is all of this. But I want to really zero in on the subconscious mind for a moment because this is where the subconscious mind is highly different than everybody else. The conscious awareness, that's your ego. That is you mindfully plugging into everything going on. You can hear the thoughts in your head. You can make conscious choice. When you start to familiarize yourself with identity, you can hear and feel what she is thinking. Now, she does not use words for the most part. She has to learn how to use words. More specifically, you have to consciously teach her the language. I say her because my identity is a girl. And the more you familiarize yourself with these 6 parts of the mental system, what you're really doing is familiarizing yourself with their personalities, their genders, their desires, their wants, what their purpose is, and how to manage them. Everything inside the subconscious mind, the 5 parts of the subconscious and the 1 conscious awareness, together that's your 6-part mental system. Every one of them, you're going to be able to tap into emotions, desires, feelings, but not the subconscious mind. It is the only part of the 6-part mental system that is completely void of feeling, but it seems to operate and function like a machine or what I like to call an AI. Now, my philosophical brain has taken this a step further, and this is where it gets fun. Is the subconscious mind unconscious, or is it sentient and conscious, but separate from our own conscious awareness? I don't know. I have no idea. I function with the assumption that the subconscious mind is sentient and highly logical and can be negotiated with, but I am not part. We are not part. Our conscious awareness is not part of that sentience if it is, in fact, separate from the consciousness and sentient in its own. It also might be not sentient and just an automated AI. And that is the next age of discovery and exploration. So I'm going to leave that to future philosophers and start focusing in closer on this. Now, one of the things I love is the point of truth or the defined self, which is that 4th point right in the dead center of the triangle. And if you ever look into geometry, triangles, Euclidean geometry, there is a tension point between 3 things. I want you to imagine that there is a ball of the defined self in the dead center of a triangle. And each one of these points, one with identity, one with conscious awareness, one with the subconscious mind, all pulling a tension string on that center ball. That is going to give you the highest point of stability with that type of tension, which when you achieve that, you have a stable self-identity. That's vital. So moving on to the cognitive core, inside the identity, we have this gorgeous, beautiful machine. This is what I refer to as the subconscious mind and or the cognitive core that is run by the subconscious mind. Now, when everything is what I call optimum mental wealth, when everything is aligned, balanced, and everyone is up and running properly and functioning inside this system, this 5 parts of the cognitive core runs and purrs like a beautiful harmonized machine. It is the engine of the identity. It is the engine of the subconscious mind. This is where and how our perspectives are formed. Inside, there are 5 chambers, and yes, the order absolutely matters. The first 3, love, ethics, and beliefs, is what I refer to as integrity. Love is the first chamber. This is identity. This is what she loves, what she wants, dreams, desires, goes for, shoots for, everything she loves and wants, from an ice cream cone up to the love of her life, is love. There is no rationale for it. It is the only thing in the entire human mind that has absolutely no rational explanation. I do not know why we love. Now, this is the most gorgeous part of the entire human mind right here, and this is why. There needs to be no reason for love. Bottom line, there is no reason for it. We don't have to have a reason for love. We just do. With all the logic that I've put forth, with all of the research I've done, this is one hard conclusion that recently I have had to just accept, because despite all the logic I've been through, I cannot find a single logical explanation why we love. We just do. Now, what this actually means is that love can and is and only exists birthed off of absolutely nothing. There is no resource that it requires. It is the one thing that we can create with absolutely nothing, which just makes it that much more beautiful. Now, from what we love, we have values formed. Values are our ethics. When I talk about the 12 stages of growth, I am 100% referring to these values and ethics. Now, I have not delved into this deeply yet. This is my next project, but there are 2 types of ethics. There are the core ethics, which are very solidly documented from my research and Dr. Graves' work, very predictable, very standard core ethics that everybody follows. There are also minor ethics. The minor ethics is where they solidly reflect what you love. So when you have a solid love base and you have a solid ethic, together those things create what we believe. And in the next diagram, we're going to really focus on what we believe. Now, when you have your love, your ethics, and your beliefs, you are able to form your name. I'm going to borrow from our beautiful, beloved Shakespeare here. William, what's in a name? Well, here's what's in a name. A name is a summation of our love, our ethics, and our beliefs. A name is a summation of who we are. A name, a single word, summarizes these 3 things. The most basic example I can give you is my word, oral storian. My name is Oral Storian. And when I break down the meaning of the word oral storian, it is very simply what I love, what I value, and what I believe, all wrapped up in a single name. When we are abused and somebody calls us a name, it is this part of the cognitive core that is under attack. This is why name calling hurts so much, is because they are actually attacking these 3 things: love, ethics, and beliefs. When you have your name, your love, your ethics, your beliefs that compose your name, all these things defined, you have a perspective. Now, our subconscious mind does all of these things without any effort from us. They do all of these things without any work from us. We don't have to do anything. This is all subconsciously hardwired into our logic system. Our subconscious mind takes care of it for us. This is why, according to CDC&M, 95% of our actions in life are decided by the subconscious mind. It is all coming off of this gorgeous little cognitive core. Now, you can become aware of all of this, and that becomes a game changer. When you become aware of this process, it goes from being 95% of our choices are being made by the subconscious mind to about 5% of your choices are being made from the subconscious mind. That number is statistically as high as it is because we are not aware. As soon as the conscious awareness and the ego steps in to assist the subconscious mind in this endeavor, that statistic drastically changes. So I want to really put an emphasis on the reason why according to NIM and CDC, that 95% of our life choices are made up of the subconscious mind is because we are not doing our job because we don't know. So the cognitive core, everything I do with the Healing Garden, is meant to raise awareness, to provide people with a guide, a handbook, a compass, and a map of the subconscious mind so they can start changing that statistic, 95%. So they, the ego, the conscious awareness, can start implementing and assisting the subconscious mind. Because the subconscious mind, well, as you're going to see when I start going over one of these diagrams, the subconscious mind, as logical as it is, can be stupid. It's as if the programming is left over from the Ice Age. The way I love to put it is this way. Imagine you've got your Star Trek, your Starship Enterprise, and you've got this gorgeous core, the core at the center of the ship that runs the entire ship. And I see the episode where there's a problem with the ship and the ship starts to turn on the crew. And Scotty's on the ship and he's ripping it apart and they're in engineering. And they find out that the problem with the ship is there is an old piece of equipment from the Ice Age that is still embedded or was used in the earlier ship design. So that this itty bitty computer chip that's left over from 20th century technology is inside the machine and it's AI. And it's taken over the entire programming because it had one logical fallacy embedded into its programming. And that logical fallacy was keep the unit safe. And so when it detected danger, the cognitive core, the subconscious mind, our analogy of this archaic piece of equipment in the Starship Enterprise, ended up hijacking the entire Starship Enterprise and turned on the crew to keep the engine safe. So that's pretty much what goes on in abuse. That's pretty much what's going on in our lives. I'll be breaking this down further, but really the perspective is the entire mental environment. The perspective is the entire mental function. The perspective is the reality, and it is the individual truth that is based off of this logical system, love, ethics, and beliefs. Now, if there is anything wrong with love, ethics, and beliefs, your perspective is going to be altered. If you change the name, there's going to be inconsistency. Cognitive dissonance is when there is inconsistency along these 5 basic chambers: love, ethics, beliefs, name, and the perspective. Now, I have toggled with my logic many times to debate whether or not this should be just 4 chambers resulting in a perspective, or if perspective should in fact be included in this. And I am a firm believer that yes, perspective should very much be included, and this is why. Because these 5 chambers, at any given time, if they are altered, can completely obstruct the individual's logic, and as a result, the perspective can and will be completely altered, which is what we see in the case of abuse. Now, there's a lot of physics in this, a lot of emotional physics. Emotions have positives and they have negative charges. I do not refer to these as bad or good. That is ethical dilemma, ethical diplomacy. That is doctrine. I am not looking at good or bad. I am looking at positive or negative, which need to be really equated to the laws of physics. A battery has a negative and a positive charge. Our brains are very much like batteries. Our emotions have negative and positive charge to them. It is imperative going forward in everything I do at the Healing Garden that the words negative and positive have no affiliation whatsoever with the words good or bad, right or wrong. And that is imperative. I do not have it yet, but I will have an article on my classroom that breaks down the difference between positive, negative, good, bad, right, and wrong. If you have a surplus of positive charge, you are going to end up with a positive emotional mental environment. Sometimes I refer to this as EME. If you have a surplus of negative charge, we are going to see a negative emotional mental environment. In the negative emotional mental environment, this is where we see negativity, pessimism, scarcity mindset start to creep in. If you have a surplus of the positive charge, you're going to have that positive mindset. This is where we see abundance mindset. This is where we see positivity or optimism. If you have a surplus of positivity, you're actually out of balance as much as if you have a surplus of negative charge. Harmony is when you have a good rational balance of both. I should not say rational. If you have a properly harmonized, aligned balance of both, and that's when you have neutrality, and that is when you can have, as you're going to see in the next slide, proper balance for alignment and forecasting. So now moving on to our next slide. This is going to be our last slide, and then I'm going to end the video, and this one's going to cover a lot. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is this gorgeous red box here, because if anyone is like me watching this, you're going to go right to these words, the abuser's door. I do not cover the abuser's door inside this video. And the reason why is because that is an entire hour of just breaking this down. And this is where the gold is. This is where all of our understanding of what exactly is going on inside of our mind is. And I know we're all eager to break this down and see what's going on, which I will be doing. But before I can do that, we must first comprehend the cognitive core and the stages of change. So this is going to be hard for everybody because we're eager, but we're going to not focus on this at all in this video. That's what's going to be for the next video. Just taking a minute here because this is a lot and I need to process. All right. Let's get started. We all know about the stages of grief. The stages of grief reflect on information of 2, 3A, 4, 5, and 6B. And that is it. That is all that these stages of grief cover. It also jumps over to 9, and that's about it. This is why I feel that these stages of grief are inadequate, is because it shows a very small fraction of what's actually going on. This is the bigger picture of the stages of grief. I refer to this as the stages of perspective change. This is how a perspective is formed. So we're going to go back over here to beliefs. We have love, that is defined by what we love. We have ethics, which is defined by the 12 stages of growth. We have our beliefs. Our beliefs come from external data, also from love and ethics, concluding our beliefs. This is imperative to understand. If a belief originates from what we love and what we ethically value, a belief has no emotion to it. There's almost no feeling. It's a very warm, fuzzy feeling. I am going to use one of my favorite examples for this. I love animals. I value animals' rights. Therefore, I am a vegetarian and I care about the environment because animals live here too. I believe that we should protect and preserve animals who can very easily be subjected to our neglect and therefore suffer. Now, I promise this will be less than 2 minutes. I'm timing myself. The Hoover Dam, since its creation, invention, has resulted in 130 plus species of fish that has gone extinct. This makes me very angry. My belief that animals should be protected is without emotion. My belief that the Hoover Dam, which is an external data information, is affecting my core belief from my core ethic and love is what's making me angry. It is the external data that causes the emotion. When it is from the cognitive core, love and ethic equals belief, there's no emotion. when it comes from an outside data source, there is emotion. Every time, consistently. The reason why this is important is because when we hear something that we are emotional about, that is a red flag that external data has been entered into the cognitive core, and it needs to be evaluated. When we are examining our cognitive core for limiting beliefs, these are limiting beliefs right here. This is where they all happen. When we are examining our cognitive core for limiting beliefs, a limiting belief will have an emotional response to it. A natural belief will not. This is the determining factor to identify where the logical fallacy is taking place inside the cognitive core. If there is an emotional response, it is coming from either an external data or it is coming from a limiting belief, what I call logical fallacy. We receive data from 5 sources only, externally. We receive them from our 5 senses. Our 5 senses are what we hear, what we see, what we smell, what we taste, and what we physically feel with our nerves. These are not facts because every eye sees things differently. Every ear hears things differently. Every nose smells things differently. We all know about super tasters. Taste buds feel something differently, and our physical skin observes feelings differently. 100% of our data that is accumulated and collected is opinion. It is a common misleading belief and logical fallacy that facts are taken into our information center. Because 100% of all the data that we receive is opinion. It is up to our belief system, our logical line, our cognitive core to logically deduce if something is correct or incorrect. Specifically, it is up to us to logically deduce if the information received is compatible with our cognitive core, if it contradicts our cognitive core. Now, this contradiction, cognitive dissonance, all comes from our beliefs. Change the definition of love, and it contradicts our beliefs. Change our ethics or force another ethic onto us, it changes our beliefs. Call us a different name and change our name, it changes our beliefs. Tell us what the perspective or the reality actually is, and it will contradict our beliefs. The beliefs is the core of cognitive dissonance. This is where cognitive dissonance takes place. When I break down the stages of change to you over the next few minutes, hour, I'm going to be showing you exactly how and where cognitive dissonance occurs and how to fix it in the next video with the abuser's door. Cognitive dissonance is the emotion that occurs when there is logical fallacy or contradiction inside the cognitive core. In these videos, I will be breaking down all of the cognitive dissonance and the cognitive core, all of it. So first, external data information goes into our funnel. It goes into our beliefs. Stage 2 is shock, which is actually the first thing that happens. And the reason why we experience shock is because it is a shock to our system. Because data coming into our system alters our perspective. It alters our entire cognitive core. I want you to really imagine that these 5 chambers are actually a telescope, a huge telescope. Imagine the Hubble telescope, and the perspective is what we're actually looking into the world with. It's the lens. The beliefs are the knob of the Hubble telescope, or our perspective telescope. And whenever a belief comes into our system, we are adjusting the focus knob. This is vital to understanding the cognitive core. This is a giant telescope allowing us to perceive truth and reality. As a result, when information goes in, it's going to give us a shock because we're altering our entire perspective. Our entire reality is being broken down and rebuilt. So we're going to experience shock. This immediately launches us into a significantly vulnerable position, which I refer to as the weak spot or the abuser's door. I will say again, I am not going to be dissecting that in this video. Because this vital information, because any information that comes into our belief system is so vital to our mental health and our reality, our truth and our perspective, it is imperative that we check to make sure this data is incorrect or correct. As a result, we automatically go into something that I call a logical check, and we formally were referring to this as negotiation stage in the stages of grief. This is not the stages of grief. It could be good news. It could be positive news. It could be a raise. It could be you just won the lottery and you are now a billionaire. We still go through the stages of negotiation. What? Are you sure? Did you? What? And you're going to see us toggle. We always toggle between shock, disbelief, denial, and negotiation. This is what is happening as we are processing the data. This goes fast, and it happens almost always without the conscious awareness being part of this process. As you become aware of it, you consciously become part of the process. It's actually quite extraordinary. So you're going to toggle between shock. While you are still in shock, you are going to begin logically checking the belief. Are you sure? Did you try? This is the negotiation stage. Now, it's not yet accepted. There is an offshoot at 3B where you can say, I don't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I'm going to step aside for a moment and look at the stages of grief. This is where we get stuck at 3B, denial. We get stuck here because we don't want the reality that's coming. We are resisting the change that needs to occur. It is, in most cases, us holding on to our perspective and our reality. Let's say, for example, that I have a husband. My husband passes away. We were planning a 50th year anniversary to Hawaii that year. His loss, that death, now means that I am losing that dream of us in Hawaii, spending and celebrating our 50th anniversary. I don't want that kind of a change. So in most cases, I'm going to resist that because I want this change. So the desire, the love, and the ethic is going to desperately hold on to it, while the belief, the fact, is going to say, your husband is dead. This right here is where we resist the cognitive core processing. And this is where we get stuck. This is where we get stuck for years in prolonged grief, is because the contradiction is the husband is dead and we don't want to accept it to alter the perspective accordingly. We are resisting the change. If there is no denial, or if the denial is extremely short-lived and the negotiation checks out, we go into the acceptance stage. We have accepted it, and now it's time to start processing the data to adjust our scope accordingly. Our perspective is what's going to be changed most likely. Now, if you have a solid defined, we're going to go back over to this graph for just a moment. If you have a solid philosopher's compass, identity, conscious awareness, and the subconscious mind, this is not going to be difficult for the most part because this is solid. You will have all the support you need to get through this. So going back over here, assuming that you've accepted the change, you've confirmed everything logically checks out, this is data that you can receive, and it's going to alter your perspective. You've reached the acceptance stage. This happens so fast that we overview this, we overstep it almost instantly and go right into inventory. The next two stages, acceptance and inventory, happen so fast that they were overlooked when we originally built the stages of grief. They were completely overlooked. Acceptance and inventory are done so quickly. Almost instantly, we can see that, yes, I have accepted the news that my husband is dead. I don't want to use this anymore. Let's use a different analogy. Let's say the raise. Let's go with, I've gotten a raise at work. I've gotten a promotion at work. So I've accepted the news that I have the promotion at work. I've accepted that. And that then moves over to inventory. Now, as soon as you're asking the boss, are you sure? Well, you sure you're not going to pass this over to so-and-so? You're giving it to me? I don't believe it. I just can't believe it. Now we're in that denial. And then it starts to sink in and you accept it. They have chosen me. Now you see the acceptance. Now you see the inventory. What is this going to mean? You have, and this is where our emotion joy comes in, or sad if it's a loss, and we immediately launch into an inventory. This is where my days as a supply and demand manager absolutely step in. And we take an inventory, we count our gains or our losses. If it is a gain, it is a positive resource experience. If it is a loss, it's going to be negative. If it is a positive, it's going to be contributing to our emotional mental environment. If it is a negative, it is going to contribute to our negative emotional mental environment. And depending upon how much positive, negative we have, is going to determine if this is going to create a positive situation, more healthy, or if it's going to add to our negative emotional mental environment. This is really important. If you have an imbalance where you have a surplus of negativity, no matter how much positive you're going to get, you're probably going to see the bad side. And this is where we get that mindset in. Over here, if you have a positive mindset, you are most likely optimistic. And that's when, even if it's a loss, you're going to see the good side. That's because you have a surplus of positivity charge or you have a surplus of negativity charge. For now, we're going to assume that this person is neutral and they have neither positive nor negative. They are harmonized and aligned and balanced. So it's assuming for the rest of this video that that is what we're going to look at. And then we'll look at positive, negative as well as we go along. So you have the acceptance, the inventory, and then we have immediately deciding if this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. In this case, good and bad is good for this person, which means gain of resources, or bad for this person, which means loss of resources. And I'm going to emphasize good and bad for this individual. Again, this is not a reflection of ethics, morals, or ethical doctrine. This is a reflection of good for the person, bad for the person. As in, do they have a gain of resources, a loss of resources? Is the change resulting in loss, or is the change resulting in a gain? The cognitive core is almost 100% exclusively all about our resources, not always our corporeal or tangible resources, but our mental resources as well. And then we have the neutral, where there's no change. This is where we might hear about someone passing away and it doesn't affect us at all because there is no change in our resources when we hear this news. So we also have that option as well. Once we decide if this is going to be a positive or a negative adjustment to our resources and our inventory, we begin calculating forecasting. But before we do that, we have to celebrate, which is where joy comes in, which is usually where I'm picking up flowers on the way home from work. We're getting champagne. We're going to go out to dinner. We got to celebrate my new job. Or we experience grieving, sad, and then we move into anger. This is our instinct to protect ourselves. This is coming from our defense system, and I will not be getting into this here. That is part of the 6-part mental system that I elaborate on later. For now, it is just important to note that anger is part of the defense system and it follows sadness almost always. In the case that it does not follow sadness, it's because sadness was skipped and it went right over there, which is also very possible. And of course, as we all know, we can toggle between sad and anger, and we're always toggling between all of this. Once you get to acceptance and you fully accept it, there's always a toggling. It's almost never a clear transition. So as we saw with shock and logical checking with the negotiation, we toggle back and forth. Or in most cases, we are still in shock while we experience the denial and the negotiation. We finally get into acceptance. And this is where it's really cut and clear. Once we finally get into acceptance, we even might get a little bit into acceptance and then we jump back over to negotiation. We might toggle here a bit more. And then the inventory is really fast. That one usually is overlooked because it's so fast. With sad or joy, whichever the emotional celebration might be, we might toggle between the anger and the sadness. We might toggle between the joy and the disbelief, which is where we're jumping here of, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm so happy. I can't believe it. I'm so happy. And that's just part of it. Allow it. Be aware of this. And this is important to mental health. Be aware of it and allow it to take its time. Trying to force acceptance causes mental illness. That is vital. This is where a lot of therapy messes up. We try and force acceptance. This is where Buddhism really, a lot of Buddhists, a lot of beginning practicing Buddhists will force acceptance before they're ready. There is a reason why the emotions take the time they take. There is a reason why the subconscious mind takes its time. This is a lot to process, and there's a lot to go over. There's a lot of steps. Nothing can be missed. This is a very highly tuned, logical system. Everything, every grain of rice must be counted. When we rush, when we force, we miss grains of rice. It is imperative that everything be allowed to move and ebb and flow as the time requires. Do not force acceptance any more than we should force sadness, any more than we should resist anger. I cannot emphasize the mental health is absolutely dependent upon allowing this process to happen naturally and accordingly. After the celebration or the grieving and the anger will mellow out into what I like to call melancholy, not depression. Depression is something else entirely. Calling this stage depression is a misnomer. It's misleading and it really confuses the entire process. It is a very somber state of being. It's very much a somber melancholy. And it's just coming off of the low of the anger or the high of the anger and settling into that somber state. Same thing, if you are experiencing joy, you're going to have elation up here. And then you're going to come down to that somberness. There's going to be somberness right in here. Whether it's good or bad, you're going to feel that drop, because if it's sad and anger, you're going to be all the way down at the bottom and then you're going to come up to somberness. And if you are, or down from somberness if you're angry, down to somberness if you're angry. And if you're having elation and joy, you're going to come down. That's the crash. You're going to come down to somberness. And it's just coming back to the neutral space. That's all we're doing. So the sad, it's going to pull you here and then it's going to drop you right back to somberness. I almost should have this so it doesn't have this negative thing coming back out. It should come back actually right to a solid line right here, because this is where everything relines. So I'm probably going to redo this graph later. That being said, you have forecasting now. This is stage 7. This is when it's the next morning. You probably got drunk with your wife. You had too much champagne. You celebrated. You talked about all the things you're going to do with the money that's now coming in. You're billionaires. You're going to plan some dreams. You got to tell all your people. You probably, in a drunken stupor, drunk texted everybody all the good news, which you now probably regret. You've got a hangover. It's the next morning and you are mellow. You are somber. This is the forecasting stage. The forecasting stage is when you sit down and you start crunching the numbers. The crunching the numbers stage is when you start analyzing your life in your new perspective. What is going to be different? What is going to be the same? If it's a new job, we're going to financially crunch the numbers and we're going to find out. This is the part that I like to go, all right, how much is Uncle Sam taking from my new paycheck? Yes, I won $8 billion. Reality check happens here. How much of that is going to be taxed? How much am I actually going to get? This is forecasting. You finally have grieved. You've accepted the loss. You've been angry. Now you're sad. Now you start looking at your new life without your spouse. This is where you start forecasting. This is interesting because this is where I get real heavy into something I call story sickness. This is where we have to know the future. Our mental health is solidly dependent upon knowing what we can project as our future. It's a trajectory. If we do not have a trajectory, we literally go insane. We must have a trajectory. The trajectory is vital. We must know our past. That is understanding our trauma. We must comprehend our point in the present. That's knowing who you are. And we must have a defined trajectory. That is understanding where we are going. If we do not have a complete story, comprehension of our past, our present, and our future, we are not okay. This is where I say we are story beings. And if we do not have our story figured out with full and complete comprehension, we go insane. We must understand our past, hence knowing our trauma. We must understand who we are and our point of naming in the present. And we must have an accurate trajectory. When we receive an altering belief that changes this, it is changing our story, our heading, and our trajectory. This is the stage in which our trajectory gets adjusted accordingly. This is where things for me get amusing. If you are an optimist and you have a surplus of positive charge, you're going to see the bright side. You are going to most likely over forecast. Your trajectory is most likely going to be inaccurate. If you are a pessimist and you have a surplus of negative charge, you are most likely going to underestimate the positive. If you are neutral, you are probably going to be really good at forecasting. Ideally, you want to be really good at forecasting and planning your trajectory, and I'm going to explain why here in a moment. The next stage of change is the 8th stage, and this is where things get to be fun. It's the observation stage. It's when you analyze your trajectory against your forecast, and you get to see how accurate your prediction was. So you observe. Now, if you are really good at predicting and forecasting, your observation is going to confirm that your forecast was accurate, and you go right over to stage 9, which is normalizing. Formally, this was referred to as acceptance stage. That is incorrect because we've already accepted it. It's all the way over here. It's normalizing it. But what if you are not good at forecasting? Well, this is the fun part. If you are bad at forecasting, if you are not skilled at forecasting, or if you are experiencing or suffering from either a positive emotional mental environment or a negative emotional mental environment, most likely your forecasting introduction is going to be way off, which means when you observe, you're going to see more gain than you expected, or you're going to see more loss than you expected, and you're going to feel discouraged and annoyed. And what's really happening is you are going all the way back over to inventory number 5, and you are doing it again. People can do this up to 3 or 4 different times until you get this right. I am really bad at this. Personally, I am optimistic, so I almost always overestimate the trajectory, and I am almost always wrong because I almost always see the positive in the best, and I almost always am disappointed and I'm frustrated. So I always have to go back, redo the inventory, and rinse and repeat. But I keep going down the line of positivity where I forecast, over forecast, and then I observe and I'm like, I did it again. As I've gone through this with conscious awareness, I'm getting better at trying to be more realistic or neutral when I forecast. That way I can make better predictions. That way I can make better choices to ensure that my life choices reflect the actual reality so I can prevent loss. We will repeat this as many times as necessary until our perspective matches our inventory and our forecast. The universe loves everything aligned, and every time it's not aligned, she's going to fix it. So inventory, forecast, perspective. Inventory, forecast, perspective. And we're going to keep repeating this until. Life is the only teacher that gets this right. Understanding that you might see things positively or negatively is going to help get you into that neutral stage. Accepting that you are positive is going to allow you to make better choices, that you need to probably turn down the tone or the dial of that positivity so you make more neutral choices. In the case of 8C, logical check the data. This is a special little case, which we will be elaborating more in the next slide. And it is only applicable to the abuser's door. This assumes, the entire diagram assumes that the beliefs we received were correct, not malicious, 100% accurate, like you did get a job and or a partner or a spouse did pass away. It's non-refutable and the whole process works. But what if somebody gives you data and they do not deliver? We see this in the case of veterans who go to war. We see this in the case of a colleague we trusted, right there with that abuser's door, who gave us information that was false and we accepted it. I don't want to get into this further, but when you go through this process and you get to the observation and you realize that the forecast is wrong, that we forecasted wrong. One possibility, unfortunately, is that the information we received was not correct. We were promised an outcome that was not received, or the data was false. Logical fallacy. This is where, if you keep going through the forecast, the observation, and repeating 5 with acceptance, inventory, we go to inventory, not acceptance. We go to inventory and we keep cycling through 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need to pause and go all the way back to 1, 2, 3. We need to go back to 1, 2, 3. This does not happen. We're going to get into this later with the abuser's door. I will explain why then. But this is where the disconnect is going between therapists and patients, between an individual and their own cognitive health. This right here is the problem. The logical checking the data. We don't even consider it in most cases because we trust the abuser. We trust the information given. As a result, we keep cycling through 5, 6, 7, 8 without even considering that 1, 2, and 3 is incorrect. I'm not going to talk anymore on 8C. I'm just going to focus now on AB with that cycle of you go through with inventory, you forecast, you go through the inventory, you determine if it's good news, bad news, neutral news, you forecast. Finally, you get it right where you need to. You get the right forecast. You observe, you're finally correct. And now you can move on to normalizing. And life continues with your new perspective. That is how perspectives are formed. That is, in completion, your cognitive core. Your subconscious mind's job is to compute emotions out at each stages: love stage, ethics stage, belief stage, name stage, perspective stage, to communicate to the conscious awareness how things are going at the cognitive core. So going back to the philosopher's compass, you have identity. Identity has the cognitive core inside of her beautiful little mind. The conscious awareness is in charge of making decisions to best suit identity's needs. The subconscious mind is in charge of computing the perspective and then providing the update and the status of the cognitive core processing to the conscious awareness. That way, the conscious awareness can make better decisions to protect identity. But what if the conscious awareness is not aware? Thank you so much for joining me for this video. This has been Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden. My next slide is going to break down exactly what's going on with the abuser's door, the weak spot, and how a cognitive core can be hijacked and completely taken over by an abuser. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.